Okay, let's unpack this. Was Cain really the firstborn of humanity?
Hmm.
I mean, when you read Genesis, that's kind of the immediate impression, isn't it? Cain, then Abel. Simple.
It seems that way initially, yeah.
But
Yeah.
but we've actually got some, well, pretty intriguing clues scattered through the text itself. Clues that maybe point towards a much bigger sort of unrecorded family history for Adam and Eve.
Right. And that brings us to this idea of textual silences. It's a really key concept here.
Textual silences. Explain that a bit.
Well, Genesis gives us the foundational story, the bedrock of understanding human origins, but it's also a very carefully crafted narrative.
Meaning it doesn't spell out every single detail.
Exactly. It doesn't give a minute by minute account. There are definitely places where significant time could have passed, where events could have happened that just aren't explicitly mentioned.
Okay.
And this deep dive, well, we're exploring one of those potential gaps, the early family life of Adam and Eve, possibly extending beyond just Cain and Abel.
Right. It's like you get the main plot points of a movie, but some of the cool backstory, how the world got populated, kind of happens off screen.
That's a good analogy.
And our goal here, just to be clear, isn't about undermining Genesis or anything like that. Not at all.
No, absolutely not. It's about appreciation.
It's about getting a richer, maybe more nuanced feel for this incredible story. We do that by looking closely at specific bits that make you go, huh, wait a minute.
Well,
Like,
right.
who is Cain actually afraid of? What's the deal with his wife and this land of Nod? How do we read Eve's curse? Even the meaning behind Eve's name. It all potentially fits together.
Okay, so where do we start? The traditional view.
Yeah, let's start there. Genesis 4, verse 1.
Yeah.
Cain's born, verse 2. Abel's born. Seems pretty straightforward.
That's the standard reading, Cain first, then Abel.
But, like, almost immediately, some big questions pop up from those very verses, don't they?
They really do. You get to Genesis 4.14, and Cain is terrified. He says, anyone who finds me will kill me.
Anyone. Who's anyone at this stage?
Good question. According to the immediate narrative, it's just Adam, Eve, and Abel, who Cain has just killed.
Yeah.
So his parents? Is he afraid of his parents enacting vengeance? It seems unlikely. Or at least not the full picture.
Yeah, it feels like more than that. And then just a couple of verses later, Genesis 4.17, he wanders off, finds a wife, and builds a city.
Right. Builds a city and names it after his son Enoch. The jump from, apparent desolation to city building is quite stark.
It really makes you stop and think, who are these other people?
Absolutely. And these aren't new radical questions either. Theologians and readers have pondered these points for, well, centuries. They're embedded right there in the text.
Okay, so let's dig into that fear factor more.
Yeah.
Genesis 4.14. If it really was just mom and dad left, his level of panic seems misplaced.
It does seem disproportionate, yes. So what does the text offer? Well, Genesis 5.4 is pretty crucial.
What's that say again?
It mentions, sort of matter-of-factly, that after Seth was born, Adam lived another 800 years and had other sons and daughters.
Oh, okay. Other sons and daughters.
Yes. And the key thing is, the text doesn't specify exactly when these other children were born relative to Cain and Abel.
So they could have been born before Cain or in the gap between Cain and Seth.
It's entirely plausible. Genesis isn't always presenting a strict, linear, chronological record of every single birth. It often focuses on a specific line, a specific theological thread.
The main characters, so to speak.
Pretty much. So Adam and Eve could have had a sizable family already existing by the time of Cain's exile. Remember, Adam lived 930 years, according to Genesis 5.5. That's a long time.
A very long time.
Yeah.
Plenty of time for, well, lots of kids.
Exactly. So when Cain fears anyone who finds me, he might literally be talking about siblings, nieces, nephews, a growing clan who would rightly see him as a murderer.
That makes a lot more sense than just fearing Adam and Eve.
Now, some interpretations lean towards a more symbolic fear of divine justice or future generations, maybe a tribal fear, and those are valid readings too.
Sure.
But the most straightforward reading of anyone who finds me does suggest other contemporary people.
Okay, so that's the fear. What about Nod and the wife and the city? Genesis 4.1617.
Right, this is another big piece of the puzzle. Cain goes to the land of Nod, east of Eden.
And the text says he finds a wife there. It doesn't say he, started a family from scratch. He finds one.
Precisely. The wording implies she was already there, part of an existing population in Nod.
And Nod itself.
Yeah.
It's presented like a place, a region, not just some empty wasteland he names, right?
Correct. It reads like a known geographical area, which again suggests people,
All right.
inhabitants.
And then he builds a city. You can't really build a city, even a small ancient one, by yourself, or even with just one wife and eventually one son.
No. Building a city requires labor, resources, a community, some form of social structure. It strongly implies a pre-existing population group that Cain either joins or organizes.
So connecting those dots, Cain's fear, the wife and Nod, the city. It all points towards Adam and Eve having other children, maybe many others, whose stories just weren't the focus of this particular narrative thread.
It creates a very consistent internal picture, using just the text itself. These other children could have populated areas like Nod.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's look at Eve, specifically the curse in Genesis 3:16.
Yes. I will surely multiply your pain and childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Some translations say multiply your sorrow and your conception.
The key word there seems to be multiply.
Exactly. Multiply implies
Right.
more of something that already exists, right? You can't multiply zero.
So if Eve had never conceived or given birth before the fall, what exactly was being multiplied?
That's the question. It strongly suggests there was a pre-fall experience of conception and perhaps even childbirth that was then made more sorrowful or painful after the fall.
Which then makes you think about Genesis 1:28, before the fall, where God tells them to be fruitful and multiply.
Right. Would God give a command they were incapable of fulfilling at that time? It seems unlikely.
So maybe childbirth was intended, maybe it even happened pre-fall, but it was different, less painful.
It opens up that theological possibility, certainly. A pre-fall state where fulfilling the command to multiply was perhaps without the intense pain and sorrow later associated with it due to sin entering the world. The fall then multiplied the negative aspects.
Fascinating. Okay, and sticking with Eve, what about her name?
Yes, Genesis 3:20. Adam names her Eve. Why? The text says, because she was the mother of all living.
Was. Past tense, not will be or is destined to be.
Exactly. That tense is quite specific and potentially very revealing.
And the timing here is crucial too, right? This naming happens after the curse we just talked about, but before Genesis 4, before the recorded birth of Cain.
Correct. So Adam declares her the mother of all living, using a past tense construction, even before the narrative explicitly records her having Cain or Abel.
So the implication is?
The implication is that she might have already been a mother, that her status as mother of all living was already established, even if those earlier children weren't the focus of the story moving forward.
Wow. Okay, so we have Cain's fear, Nod and the wife, the multiplied pain, the past tense in Eve's naming. These are quite a few textual clues pointing in the same direction.
They are. They build a circumstantial but textually grounded case for Adam and Eve having children before, or at least besides, Cain and Abel.
So let's pull back a bit. Why wouldn't Genesis just tell us this directly? What's the bigger picture, the narrative or theological reason for this silence?
Well, we need to remember what Genesis is and what it's trying to do. It's not aiming to be a comprehensive census report of early humanity.
Okay.
It often telescopes time. It focuses in on key people and key moments that drive the main story forward, which in Genesis is largely about God's covenant, human sin, and the beginnings of redemption.
So it's selective.
Very selective. The silence about other children might actually be intentional. It narrows the reader's focus onto the lineage that matters for that specific story.
Which is?
Well, you see Cain, representing humanity, falling deeper into sin. You see Abel, the righteous victim, the first martyr in a sense. And then critically, you get Seth.
Seth, who replaces Abel, becomes the ancestor of Noah, and eventually leads towards the line from which the promised seed of Genesis 3:15 is expected.
Precisely. The narrative zooms in on that line. The other branches of the family, while potentially numerous and populating the earth, weren't central to this specific theological narrative.
And Cain City, how does that fit in?
It can be seen as representing the development of human civilization apart from that godly line of Seth. It's humanity building its own way, marked from its beginning by the legacy of Cain.
So the focus isn't necessarily strict birth order for everyone, but highlighting the key players in the unfolding drama of redemption.
I think that's a very helpful way to look at it. The purpose is theological and narrative, not just demographic history.
Okay, so let's recap the main points here. We've seen pretty compelling, though maybe circumstantial, evidence within Genesis itself for potentially unrecorded children of Adam and Eve.
There's the need for people Cain feared after killing Abel.
Right. Then there's the existence of Nod as a place where Cain finds a wife and somehow builds a city.
Then the implication in Eve's curse multiplying sorrow suggests a pre-existing, perhaps different experience of childbirth.
And Adam naming Eve mother of all living. using the past tense before Cain's birth is recorded.
And finally, understanding the narrative strategy of Genesis, its selective focus on the lineage of Seth and the story of redemption.
And for you listening, the takeaway here isn't just about trivia, right? It's about seeing how even stories we think we know inside out can hold these deeper layers, these nuances.
Absolutely. It encourages that kind of careful, questioning reading that can lead to those wonderful aha moments, even with ancient texts.
So here's a final thought to chew on. Maybe Cain wasn't the literal first human ever born after Adam and Eve, chronologically.
It's possible, based on these clues.
But he was the firstborn in the recorded story of sin's consequences playing out generationally. The first whose actions fundamentally shifted the narrative focus towards murder, exile, and building a life apart from God's immediate presence.
That's a powerful distinction. His narrative importance isn't diminished.
So the question for you is, how does thinking about this potential hidden history, these unrecorded siblings, maybe reshape how you read those incredibly foundational early chapters of Genesis? Does it change how you see the introduction of sin and its spread in the world?
It certainly shows that even thousands of years later, these texts can still surprise us and invite fresh reflection. There's always more to explore.